Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to A Real Point of View. I'm Greg. What am I? I think I'm over 21. It's just what I am. And then three other
There's
people.
no doubt about that.
Well, a room of three other people that are over 21. I'm the
Mhm.
guy. Joining me is Mr. Larry Domkowski, the must-see movie film critic. And we've got the movie man herself, Miss Karen D. And the man who doesn't pick a bad movie, Mr. Stephen C. Welcome to A Real Point of View, everybody. Today we are talking about Last Stands. There are a lot of movies out there. It doesn't really matter what genre it is or what era it's come from. There are movies out there that are so viable because of their ability to draw us in to something that could be a last stand. It could be something that's living or something that dies, but something that affects that moment in time, that magical moment in a film that keeps us on the edge of our seats. So we're going to talk about that kind of thing today. When we were looking for this assignment, you guys, did you find a lot of films that were kind of like that?
Yeah, a lot. A
Yep.
lot of films. And some were okay, some were really good. And some movies just fell into that category of, wow, what a great ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that for me too. What about you, Karen?
I was going to say, movies thrive on conflict. And The Last Stand is like, there's some sort of like denouement, big conflict to end all conflicts. It's sort of a classic movie go-to, either in the beginning, middle, or the end. There are plenty of movies that have a last stand because the point of the movie is to create conflict between the characters, major conflicts.
Yeah, I find that it doesn't really matter what type of film it is. And I know we were talking about earlier, film noir. It comes up like constantly in film noir. What about you, Steve? Did you find a lot of films that are kind of fit that mold?
I did find a lot of films that fit the mold. The one interesting thing about certain films is you can actually have multiple moments in the film where a last stand is taking place. It could be in the center of the film and the ending has nothing to do with the last stand. It's just, it involves a major pivotal point, which could be life, death. It could just be winning, losing, or something incredibly simple. But it's interesting to see where directors and writers try to stick or put the last stand to make it fit the film and, build around it or build to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I must admit, as you mentioned a moment ago, Steve, more than one location within the film. I have one of the films that I picked. I had two moments in the film that exude what you're talking about and also affected my emotion as I'm watching it. And so got my heart pumping and all those good things. So I think these are really great moments in film. So why don't we talk about some of those films, you guys? How about you, Karen? You have something that you found that just brings that to the forefront?
Sure. One movie, a classic movie in terms of last stands, is to me like one of the best films created of all time, or one of the best films of all time, in my opinion. And it's a film, when I went to see it, I said, this movie's going to win the Academy Award, even though it's a movie that hardly anyone's heard of. And at that point, it wasn't really, quote unquote, trending. But I said, this movie's going to win. And it did. It's Rocky, the 1974 Rocky with Sylvester Stallone and Carl Weathers, Talia Shire, Burgess Meredith, who was just brilliant in that movie as far as I'm concerned. But the whole point of this movie is to create a last stand. It's like Rocky is this drifter. he's drifting through life. He has no particular sense of direction. He's just like, hey, I'm just going along. I don't want much. Don't ask for much. And but I'm a boxer. So I guess that's a bad imitation of him. But anyway.
I was thinking John Wayne at first, but go on, please.
Anyway, he gets pulled into a fight with Apollo Creed, who's a stallion, who's like the king of boxers. And Rocky was released, I believe, in 1974. At a time, I think boxing's sort of fallen into disfavor these days. I mean, sort of reserved for satellite feeds or, that sort of thing. But in 1974, people still cared about boxing a lot as a sport. Mm-hmm. And that was something that people could aspire to, even though I think even then it was kind of on the wane, but it hadn't waned yet. So,
and remember too, boxing at that time, I'm sorry for interrupting, but boxing at that time was so tied into the civil rights movement. And because of Muhammad Ali and because of how it was sold to the public as well. So by the early 70s, and that started to wane a little bit, and then Sylvester Stallone made this movie Rocky and showed the journey of this one fighter. I think your choice in films is great here, Karen. It's great.
And I guess I would say, with regard to that, it's like it wasn't only Muhammad Ali; it was more like Joe Frazier,
right?
Who really started that, and not Joe Frazier. Oh my goodness,
George Foreman.
No, not George Foreman. Joe
Lewis.
Thank
Joe
you.
Lewis.
Joe Lewis. That's who I meant. In the 40s, that really started in the 40s and really is an offshoot of World War II, boxing as a metaphor for civil rights. Ironically, when Sylvester Stallone comes along, he flips that on his head because you've got this white guy who's trying to claw his way up to get into the ring with the black guy who has all the status, who has the corporate backing, who has all of the accoutrements, so to speak, of the good life and the entitlement, which is something that typically the white guy has. So it's sort of ironic. This movie has many ironies and is, I think, complex in terms of a social commentary standpoint. But the idea is that, Sylvester Stallone's character, Rocky, sort of gets goaded into fighting Apollo Creed. He doesn't really want to fight Apollo Creed because he knows Apollo Creed is going to beat the crap out of him. I mean, the man has training, the man has elegance and grace, and he could basically cross his eyes at something and would fall over. And Rocky's got just like guts and not a whole lot else. He doesn't have good hands. His feet are crap. He doesn't even have good instincts. He just has fist. He was an enforcer. So, and not a very good one because he would always let people off. That was the running joke. It was like he had such a soft heart. He wouldn't actually get the money from the people, which kind of got him in trouble with the people he was enforcing for. But anyway, they get in the ring, and Apollo Creed, from his standpoint, is like, he's a fly. He's like, he's like a gnat. He's a gnat on top of a fly. What do I care about him? But then he gets goaded into having to fight Rocky just because of almost like, not really social media, because no one was talking about social media in 1974, except that that's kind of what it was. And sort of like, well, to sort of keep the noise down, he's got to take on this gnat and crush him so he can move on with his life. And they get in the ring and everything moves toward this moment. And what I love about this movie is that it seems like almost everything to me, not just Rocky, not just Apollo Creed, not just Talia Shire, but Philadelphia, the city, the stairs of the museum, where Rocky runs up and down while he's training, the cow meat, they all lend themselves to this date with destiny. And then the music is just amazing. Bill Conti's music is just a revelation. I love that music. I still have the soundtrack. I play it to this day. It just so incredibly captures what is going on in this movie. And then you get to this, find this confrontation between Rocky and Apollo Creed. And it's like, what is going to happen? And you think, well, it should be not that hard for Apollo Creed to knock the crap out of Rocky and move on with his life, except that it is, because like Apollo Creed says at one point, this guy doesn't know, he doesn't know that he's actually supposed to lose. Like I'm supposed to beat him. He thinks he's in an actual fight that he can win. What am I supposed to do with this? It's almost like guerrilla warfare. And then I love that scene where Sylvester Stallone's Rocky is like sitting in the corner. He can't see crap because there's so much blood. He's like, cut me. And Burgess Meredith is like, what? Cut me. So they cut off his eyelid, which makes no sense from a realistic standpoint. But anyway, cuts off his eyelid so he can see enough to actually stay in the fight. And he, and I don't know if I should say, the movie's like 50 years old, so can I mention how it ends? But he, they just, these two titans, and just looking at these two men, Sylvester Stallone and Carl Weathers, they both are beautifully sculpted men. And it's like these titans going at each other. It's just amazing. I love that. So I just thought, this to me is classic Last Stand, not with guns, with fists, but it still is this huge date with destiny that is brilliantly executed with music, with atmosphere, and with great acting by both Carl Weathers and Sylvester Stallone. Just an amazing movie.
I can't argue that.
I guess I'm not really supposed to argue it. I think well expressed, it does exude that essence of Last Stand, I think, as well. Good job.
And one of the things, Karen, that I love about this film is that, and it builds up throughout the film, is that this is Rocky's one shot. It's not his first shot, it's his one shot. It's his only shot. So it sets it up right from the beginning as a stand. Mm-hmm. And that stand just gains energy throughout the whole film.
And importance.
And yes, and then once it gets to the final fight, that all that energy is released. Mm-hmm. And that adds a lot of credence to what you were saying.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite movies, and I think it's one of the best movies Hollywood has produced in its history.
Wow!
It definitely deserved to win the Academy Award that year.
Wow!
It was really an amazing movie.
Yeah, and just think Sylvester Stallone wrote it.
Yep.
And for the most part, he directed it, not, started it. That takes a lot of energy.
Yep. True that.
And I guess we label a lot of different things talent. That was truly talent. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, good movie. I always like that movie. So, hey, how about you, Larry? Give us one of your.
I had a lot of them, and I'm just going to cut to the quick because there's one film for me that has a last stand, and the characters. The last stand is the characters finally have won their freedom. And they're riding their horses down the beach, and at the very end, they see the Statue of Liberty buried in the sand. And I'm talking about the original Planet of the Apes. That to me, it was not just what Well, we kind of knew it anyway, but
Right.
still, the way that film was done, and at that time, at that time, when was that film made? 68?
I was gonna say like 68, 69, something like that.
68, yeah, 68. And Charlton Heston, who had been doing all of these, I am Moses, I am Ben-Hur, now I'm lost in my own land. You know, a huge statement on the cultural statement. But that, to me, that is one of the best final moments in film. It's overlooked because it's not a great film, but that ending, you know, when he says, "My God, they did it! They actually did it!" And basically they blew themselves up. We did. Our culture did. It's pretty incredible.
It really, yeah, that was like I remember when that film came out, even though I was like a kid at the time, but remember when that film came out, and that ending was shocking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still remember just sort of like the sense of shock from the movie going audience, because in those days you actually had to go to the movies to see movies. Who knew?
Right.
But there was like, oh my God, what happened?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of other films I just want to mention, not necessarily talk a lot about. If you want to, that's great. But a film that John Carpenter directed back in his early days in film, and that is Dark Star. I don't know if you remember that film, but it was done in the wake of 2001. Only in this case, the ship, the computer in the ship becomes sentient, but it's more than asking questions. It's more like trying to have an existential journey. And at the very end, the ship just the computer just decides to blow up the ship. Another one where there's an iconic last stand is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Very
If you
good.
haven't if you haven't seen that movie, it's really a much better film than a lot of people give it, because of the era when it came out and because of some of the choices with music. It didn't get enough serious credit by the serious critics when it first came out, but it's worth seeing. Another one is They Might Be Giants. This is a film where George C. Scott is playing somebody who has an issue with reality and convinces himself that he's Sherlock Holmes. Is the person taking care of him happens to have a last name of Watson, and there you have the story. At the end, he convinces her that Moriarty is real, and the film ends with the two of them aghast looking into the camera what we think is Moriarty. And it's kind of it's very awe-inspiring, that moment. Karen's a film that I know you like, as you said you did, is the Bedford Incident.
Mm-hmm. Love that movie. Classic Last Stand movie.
Yeah. Again, in the era of nuclear proliferation and what happens when somebody panics. I guess you got a couple more. One, Thelma and Louise. I want to mention that. That's a last stand that is continually building up throughout the film. Let's see. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. another last stand, and the whole film is about his last stand. It's about getting out from being a spy, and the sad fact is he can't get out. The 1980s film Body Heat.
Oh, love that movie.
As William Hurt, or is it John? It's William Hurt, right?
It's William Hurt.
It's William Hurt.
Yeah. As he's sitting in the prison cell, and he's looking at the high school yearbooks and realizes that he's been duped. That was an incredible moment. And then the last one I want to mention, I've got two more. One is The Great Waldo Pepper. If you've never seen this movie, see it. Robert Redford plays a World War I flying ace that always missed the battle. and everyone who flew with him said that he was the greatest ever, but the guy who's basically the Red Baron, always eluded him. Well, guess what? They both end up working for the movies after World War I as consultants. And at the very end, they have a dog fight, these two. And it's incredible on how it ends. It's obvious that Waldo Pepper Redford's character can't land his plane without crashing, and so just kind of like flies off to his landing gear had come off. So, and then the last one I want to mention is White Heat. This is a 1940s film starring
Jimmy
Jim
Cagney, right?
A brilliant film with a brilliant actor, one of his finest roles. And the thing, by that time, he had pretty much stopped doing bad guys. And then he was approached by the studio for this film, and he grabbed at it. Brilliant film. And talk about a last stand again, because this is what this film did. The whole story is about this guy's last stand. He had already been the crook. He had already been to prison. Now he's out, and now this is his last hurrah, and he knows it. And it's incredible. Well done.
Sweet. Sounds like a plethora of really good movies there.
Oh, I got more, but I'm not going to bring them up.
Oh, you may very well do that. It's just that's cool stuff. But that's the whole purpose. We want people to experience and or at least get some kind of introduction to some of these really great movies that they may not have seen or want to see again and just didn't remember. I.e., like Karen's response to some of the films that you talked about, that brings up memories of maybe even trying to see those films again.
Yeah. Well,
I've got some other movies I want to mention too, but I'll mention them later.
Oh, good. Well, one of the fun things about this, and Steve, thank you for coming up with this idea, is just how many films have that one moment in there that really pulls you in and locks you there. And how many of the films that do that this is a stand that the character is making, that the visual narrative is making, not just the character, but the visual narrative, and that's huge. So when the character and the visual narrative are all in the same place at the same time, that's very powerful, and it can really help take a movie, over the top of mediocrity and make it into something that's really quite special.
To me too, I guess I want to say that I really like this idea for a movie discussions because it really gets you thinking about, or it got me thinking about how movies are developed, how story is created, and what a last stand really means in terms of an important plot point And like Steve said, they could, I mean, a last stand could actually happen at the beginning of a movie or the middle of a movie. And there could be more than just one last stand. But and last stand to me is like this ultimate conflict, but conflict can occur in many forms. Not, I mean, guns drawn, sure, but also, you know, knives drawn, or, you know, like in West Side Story, or, you know, or a final conflict, or like in The Streetcar Named Desire, when Marlon Brando says to Vivian Leigh, we've had this date with destiny for a long time. That was a last stand. But it wasn't weapons. There were weapons involved, but not the physical weapons that you normally think of. So it's just really got me thinking about, you know, a lot of different movies and how we characterize or sort of, you know, respond to movies. So I thought that was a great suggestion too, Steve. Thank you.
So Steve, I mean, you're the man of the hour here. So what are your ideas that you'd like to share with us?
One of the first ones that came to mind is a movie that I've always had to watch when it was on. It's an unavoidable movie when it's on. I've just gotta. That's my focus. I can't focus on anything else. I'm just watching this movie, and it does have a last stand, not involving guns. Quite shocking for me, but it involves a little bit of poker, a little bit of thinking, and using your wit and understanding situations, understanding your opponent, looking for tells, things like that. And you don't normally think about that when you're watching this movie because it has nothing to do with poker at all. And that's A Few Good Men. The ending court scene of this movie is in and of itself a poker game. The bluff.
Yep.
The fold. The reading the player sitting across from you. The making of the decisions that are going to affect the lives of other people. It's really very strategic in this scene, and it's played out very well to the fact that the hero, who's, you know, in this position, not for want, but slowly is glad that he is here. He doesn't want this job. He doesn't want to do it. He knows he can't defend these people to the best of his ability. He knows he's not equipped to handle this. And yet he makes his last stand in this courtroom against our villain, who's doing his job. No matter what any of us say, anybody think about the scene, anybody think about the character of the people involved, the man is doing his job to protect a nation, of what he feels is his job to protect a nation. And it's interesting, the back and forth between the two, the one-upsmanship that the Colonel has versus, Jack Nicholson, the Colonel has over Kaffee in this, and then he bluffs. The ultimate poker move, the one thing that'll literally, you know, make or break you when it comes to a game, he goes all in and bluffs. He lets it ride on this one lie and spins it in such a way that, you know, he can't lose. And the Colonel breaks. And just that scene in general, the whole presentation of it, the way it's done, the lead up of the whole movie, like you said about Rocky, building to this moment, everything leading here, and the way they did it is just phenomenal. And the scene itself is so well written, so incredibly well acted. And we still also get in this an understanding of punishment for doing something that you know was wrong. No matter
who's accountable.
Who's accountability and everything. And that's one thing I really love about the scene. Even though the people that you want to win, they still have to be held accountable for their actions, and they still have to face the music. So this is like the big one that jumped out at me.
Steve, I think this is a brilliant choice. One of the lines in that film is really great, and that is about standing on that wall.
You want me on that wall, you need me on that wall.
Right. And what's interesting is that brief line sets up the major trope for the entire film. And that is that Tom Cruise's character is on a different kind of wall. And like you said, Steve, he doesn't want to be there. But in the process, he realizes he has to be there, that these people need him there. They want him there. You know, and so you have two different walls here, the one that Jessup's talking about and the one that Tom Cruise's character is standing on. You know, and it's a wonderful play on words. It's a wonderful play on trope. I love that this now, this was originally a stage play, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
You know, so whoever translated that from the stage to from the dramatic intent to visual narrative did a great job doing it.
Well, there's another sort of last stand in this movie too, lawyer to lawyer, which is also important because part of the running, bet in the movie is that, this guy will always go beyond the pale to settle a case. He will do anything to avoid a courtroom. And so even though he has friends who are lawyers like Kevin Bacon's character, I mean, they're friends. They play basketball together. They're the cool guys on campus. But at the end of the day, Kevin Bacon's character doesn't really respect Tom Cruise's character as a lawyer because he punts. He just punts all the time because he can't use the law. He's afraid of the law, and he just wants to get in and get out as quickly as possible. So it's about notches on the belt. I won because I settled, and I'm saving the Navy money. And Kevin Bacon's like, real lawyers go to court. And if you can't go to court, you're not really a real lawyer. So there's this sort of underlying arrogance and sort of, condescending attitude towards Tom Cruise's character from Kevin Bacon's character because of that. So he also had to deal with that. And, there were several times in that movie when Kevin Bacon's like, well, damn it, aren't you ready to settle yet? And Tom Cruise is like, yeah, I pretty much am. I'm throwing it. Nope. Not yet. It's like, please, we have our parts to play. You're supposed to settle. I'm supposed to let you settle. Can we move this along, please? And there was all this pressure to do that. He was given that case specifically because he settles. It was supposed to be swept under the rug. That was the whole point, and he was not playing his part in this whole little drama.
I did have one thing to mention with regard to Kathy's issue and situation. Throughout the whole film, there were little bits of information that gave us part of the conflict that was going on for Kathy, living up to his father's name. His father was one of the greatest defense attorneys in all of the Navy history. And here's a guy who went to law school. He was able to go to the academy because of his father. But all kidding aside, a very intelligent man on his own. But here it is, every time they mention his father, he has to take a gulp. Because now that just adds to the stigma of the fear that he has of going into this courtroom.
Living up to the expectations.
Exactly.
Yeah, he chokes.
Even when they go to Cuba, the first thing that Jessup says to him is, "How's your dad?" His dad was one of the greatest lawyers, and he's like, "Oh, down my throat again," over and over and over. And that courtroom was him facing his what do you call it? His
fears.
Oh, fear, phobia is what I was going to say. Yeah.
Phobias, yeah. So the weird thing about that scene is that, to me, Jessup knows. He knows that Cruz's character's father is dead.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't be in his.
He
he wouldn't be in his situation if he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So he was playing Cruz right away. He started that poker game the second he saw Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Yep.
Yep, he sure did.
Yeah, the one thing that Jessup was, regardless of his own idiosyncrasies, he wasn't stupid. He knew what to do. He knew his research. He did all that stuff. That's why he was there in the first place.
And there's this whole underlying theme too of at what price country, at what price security, how much are you willing to pay? How many conveniences are you willing to give up to assure your safety as a country? What does it mean to be a patriot?
Copy that.
Mm-hmm. And what wall are you standing on?
And who's standing on that wall with you?
Yeah. Great
And
choice, Steve.
Who found bricks to build the wall for you to stand on?
And how did they get to Cuba? Now here's my thing.
And who put the
No,
Game
no, no,
of
no,
Thrones
no, no, no,
characters
no, 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 no.
on the wall? And who did the title sequence for Game of Thrones?
I got
What?
one. What Cuban let the guys make the wall that was going to be there in the first place?
Yeah,
The Cubans
that's a
let them
whole.
build that wall.
That's completely
Why did they
deep.
do that?
Yeah, and what is a wall?
We
That's
were
what I
having-
want to know.
We were having a good discussion until this happened.
Well, we can start with the charge up San Juan Hill, but so.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this seems like the kind of conversation that's just gonna go into another episode. So I'd like to say thank you for watching this here on A Real Point of View, and we're gonna go from part 1 to part 2. So meet us here shortly for part 2. Thanks again for watching. See you guys in a few.